Okay, so thank you for joining our workshop with Helen today, looking at how to effectively support early years physical activity in a post-COVID world. Great of you to join us. It would be lovely if we can have some people joining in. I know what's to come and it's fun. Just bear with me just while I make Helen host so she can share her screen, but it's going to be a brilliant workshop. Helen's always fabulous, so you're in for a treat. Just bear with me one moment.
Thanks for that, Brianne. So hi to Phil, Elaine and Jay Bowler. It is going to be an interactive workshop, so it would make things a little bit easier if you want to turn on your video so I can see you. But if you're laying in bed or on a sun lounger having a G&T, I understand why you wouldn't want to put your video on, so that's fine. So my name is Helen Battelley. Let me just get my screen. Oh, hi Phil, good to see you. You're not laying on a lounger with a G&T. Okay, let me get my screen share up. Lovely. Let me just get that up there. Lovely. So let me tell you a little bit about myself before we start. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I'm an early years researcher and physical activity consultant. I work for Birmingham City University as a live action in the field researcher for early years physical activity and physical development. I also work as a teacher trainer on initial teacher training programs, and I work as an education consultant for early years. Now globally, early years is anything from birth to 8, and I specialise in working with the ages 3 to 8. So today we're kind of going to be looking at 3 to 6s, 3 to 7s as we talk about this presentation today. At the end, we will leave a few minutes for questions. If you do have any questions, then please just jot them down and I'll answer those at the end. It is going to be interactive, so please, if you do want to join in, I'll be most happy if you do. We are going to be doing a little bit of physical activity together, and I want this, because it's quite an intimate group, perhaps we can have discussions as well, so I'm happy for you to have your microphones on if you want to have any discussions about what we're talking about as well, because this is for you. This workshop is for you. This is for you to sort of inspire you and give you more information about how best to support those children in a post-COVID world. So let's start off with the beginning, which is the best place to start. Most of us can recall rich and vibrant play experiences from our childhood. Memories of climbing trees, chasing our dreams with our friends, endless days of freedom, exploring secret places, and the unfolding of time. That's certainly what my childhood was like, living in rural Norfolk. There was lots of exploring and going out with my neighbours' friends. Is that something that that resonates with you, that kind of childhood, everybody? Some nodding of heads, yeah. Physical play broadens our capacity to grow and is essential to a child's optimal development. This is all information you already know. Now, we learn more physical skills in our first 5 years than at any other time in our lives. Therefore, it's important that young children have lots of time to practice and develop those skills. A moving child is a learning child. Now, it's no surprise that by the age of 5, 90% of the brain, of the architecture of the brain, is already in place. So we can already see a strong correlation there between physical skills and the impact that has on the architecture of the brain and how important they are. Now, what I want you to do for me is just do a little exercise just before we start, because we've probably all had really busy days, probably bits of time in front of the screens. I know we're still doing that now, but what I want you to do now, just give your arms a bit of a shake, and I'd like you to cross your arms for me, please. Fold your arms. Do you have one up and one down? Lovely. And then hands behind your back. Shake them again. This time, fold your arms the opposite way. Have you still got one up and one down? And then back the other way. And then the other way. What's happening? I can see some confused faces happening there. So let me tell you what was happening. Because you've always folded your arms a certain way, that architecture is already cemented within your brain. So you've repeated that action so many times that it becomes automated, so it doesn't require any conscious cortical control. Now, as soon as we tried to fold our arms the opposite way, we really had to apply cognitive processing. We really had to think about it. Now, it's the same for young children. For every new physical skill, unless they've had time to repeat it and refine it, then it's not going to be cemented within the brain. So they're going to have to apply all of their cognitive processing as they do those new skills. It could be things like putting on their socks, or taking off their shoes, or climbing a climbing frame, or learning to balance, or balancing a ball on a tennis racket. It could be a number of things, but all of those skills require full cognitive processing. Now, the brain is incredibly complex, yet it can only manage one cognitive processing task at a time. And physical skills, new physical skills, are a cognitive processing task. So that's something to just keep in mind in relation to children's physical activity levels. And you can practice folding your arms the right way later. So for the past year, living in a global pandemic has changed the play that's been accessible to children. And there's countless research looking at the impact that this has had on children. So extracurricular activities have closed, leisure centres have closed, schools closed except for key worker children, social distancing, no mixing with family and friends, play parks closed, no parent and toddler groups. Now, the younger that cohort, the more impact that's going to have on those developmental needs. So let's have a little look about what research is saying at those particular younger cohort. Now, research indicates that many young children's physical activity levels and physical play experiences have diminished over lockdown, particularly for those living in urban areas and minority ethnic groups. Now, some of you will be familiar with some of those scenes of London during lockdown, completely empty with no signs of movement, just the odd deer or fox scampering about. So we can see that this is really going to impact those children, especially those living in urban areas. So with that in mind, let's just remind ourselves of what the recommended amount of physical activity is for a child around sort of 2 to 5 years old. So the actual guidelines state as soon as a child starts to walk, so it could be as young as sort of 8 months, but we'll say sort of 2 to 5 years here. So go into the chat room and just pop down what you think your answer might be for that question. What is the recommended amount of physical activity, so that's within a 24-hour period, that a child aged 2 to 5 should have every day? Have a look, pop it in the chat room, and we'll have a look and see what we've got. We've got 180 and 180. Fabulous. That is correct. So it is 180 minutes of physical activity. Sorry, just somebody else. 180, thank you. And 60 minutes of that time should be high impact cardio exercise. Now, up until September of last year, this figure was actually 30 minutes, but the World Health Organization have increased it to 60 minutes, again, because of the impact of lockdown and looking at how children really need to reach those levels of MVPA. So 60 minutes. So if you think about a child reaching those optimum levels, puffing and panting for 60 minutes a day, it seems quite a challenge. But not if children have an environment that's going to promote that. Yes, if it's an environment that's sedentary, trying to reach those 60 minutes and those 180 minutes are going to be a challenge. But if the environment dictates the provision that's available, then that's a whole different area, isn't it? Now, we know that children are going to be more active outside, so we need to be conscious of that when thinking about our provision. So it might be interesting to just analyse what constitutes physical activity. Part of my research a couple of years ago was looking into reception teachers' perceptions of physical activity, and it identified that actually there was some strong ambiguity between physical activity, physical literacy, physical development and physical education, and there just seemed actually a lot of reception teachers really didn't know the difference. Well, the World Health Organization are very clear on what physical activity is for young children. and it's whole body energy expenditure. So it's when our whole body is moving and expending energy. So it could be things like walking, crawling, running, jumping, balancing, climbing, in, through and over objects, taking off and on your coats when you're young. That's a whole body activity. Riding wheeled toys, cycling, jumping, skipping, etc. Now, it's not to be confused with motor development, because there's a strong correlation with my research where a lot of reception teachers thought that motor development, so things like picking up sequins with tweezers, would constitute as physical activity, or using building blocks, sitting down and using blocks. But no, we must realise that actually that's motor development and doesn't come under those 180 minutes of physical activity. So here are some insightful studies about COVID-19 and physical activity levels. Now, Leeds Trinity University said that people's health, fitness and general well-being reportedly improved during the early period of lockdown. Most people were exercising more, although some were exercising less, and it was considered positive that the weather during the first lockdown was generally good. Unfortunately, there's very little research at the moment for this last sort of winter period of lockdown, but as that emerges, that's going to be really interesting to see if there's a similar report of those activity levels. 52% of children said they were doing less activity than before lockdown. Providers recognised that some children had limited access to outdoor play during the first national lockdown. For children, this vulnerability may be reflected in their disease susceptibility, their access to education, nutrition, socioeconomic status, as well as physical and psychological safety within households. There's also concern that health crises like COVID-19 can have hidden yet potentially profound and long-lasting impacts on children's health and education. And that's from the Peddle Research Centre at Cambridge University, which is quite insightful actually. And I think it's going to be a while before we start to see some of the impact that COVID-19 has had on physical, emotional, social well-being. When schools are back, we would love to see a national recovery time characterised by active schools, time outdoors and a greater focus on physical education and sport. Those 12 weeks of concerted effort across our sector could be a wonderful way to demonstrate to children and young people, as well as parents and carers, that their well-being matters and we recognise their need to reconnect, play and have fun. And that's from Youth Sport Trust. And then this is from the Mental Health of Children and Young People report from 2020. Among children of primary school age, 14.4% had a probable mental disorder in 2020, an increase of 9.4% in 2017, and the increase was more evident in boys, with rate rising to 11.5 in 2017 from 17.9. And of all 5 to 16-year-old children with a probable mental disorder, almost half of parents said they did not have any concern about their child's mental or physical help during lockdown, for which they would usually seek help. So that's interesting. But this compared with 9 in 10 children who were unlikely to have a mental disorder. So we can see there that those children who already had a probable mental disorder prior to lockdown, that the parents saw no significant changes and had no concerns. And actually a lot of those children found it easier during lockdown, without that social anxiety. Yet, though there was a huge change, a huge vast difference in children being identified with probable mental disorders who previously hadn't. Now, 33% of girls aged 4 to 10 say they felt sad most of the time. This is during lockdown, and 95% reported that they missed their friends, their teachers and playtime. Sorry, just lost something there. Children said they're exercising for the benefits that activity brings, and including keeping fit and healthy because they enjoy it or because it helps them relax or worry less. This said, 52% of children are exercising because they are made to do it or there is nothing else to do. So it's up to you whether you think that's a good thing or not, because they're made to do it or nothing else to do. I think having nothing else to do, I think boredom does facilitate creativity and salutogenic responses. So I think boredom's probably quite a good thing. Meet them where they are. Now, primarily as educators and stakeholders, we need to be conscious of the potential challenges that each individual child may have encountered and allow time to develop relationships and social skills above all else. This is where the priority needs to be. And ensuring that your provision is developmentally appropriate is essential. I'm currently working with a group of schools where I'm delivering an intervention during the afternoon for children who are struggling with reintegration back into the classroom. So I'm offering sort of an intervention that's focused on inclusivity, personal, social, emotional well-being, and just really looking at emotional development throughout the whole process. But it's got a movement philosophy at the core. And we're in week 4, 5 at the moment, and a lot of the senior leadership team are absolutely flabbergasted at how well these children are progressing and how well they're starting to reintegrate as a result of the intervention, which is great news. And we need to move away from the ladder of progression mentality and think about a more holistic approach, a more sort of interweaving of that developmental process. So thinking about the development milestones, thinking about them interweaving rather than thinking about the progression of learning with young children during this time of post-COVID world. Now we're just going to look at 2 theories now, affordances theory by Gibson and loose parts theory by Nicholson. Now the term affordance describes the fit between the body and the environment that makes a particular action possible. Now we must remember that that environment is going to be dictated by you as the stakeholder. So whatever environment is available, it's down to you, whether it's taking them outside, whether it's being in a hall and having certain provision available. You will be dictating that environment. It's often that children cannot be active without the permission of an adult, whether that's their parent, the coach, or a teacher. So we need to think about that position that we hold of influence and think about our ability to provide affordance play. Now, props, stimuli, music and the environment are all affordances which can support children to engage in physical activity, evoking both curiosity and engagement. So things like we could use a large tarpaulin, see if the children can find ways together, working together to try and see if they can lift it up. Can they make a shelter? Can they work together to place things on top to make them jump up and down? So thinking about using their bodies, but in a creative, collaborative way. Can we think about giving them ribbon streamers that they can make themselves? So things like florist ribbon, giving them pieces of florist ribbon and getting them to tear them up and making their own ribbons with florist ribbons. They can then take them home, so they have a sense of identity of that. They have a sense of self-worth that they've created their own ribbon streamers. Can you think about obstacle courses that are going to challenge the children's movement potential? And remember, through movement, through making those obstacle courses and those movements concrete, that's how we start to embed real vocabulary and language acquisition through those tangible experiences, because children are not thinking abstractly at that age. Everything needs to be concrete and tangible. Thinking about large loose parts play, lots of provision that's available, and providing autonomy and agency. So letting children have control over that play and that provision themselves. Okay, I'm now going to share the Play Pods video. Let me stop the share and I'll just bring up the Play Pods, and then I want you to have a look at the way that play changes. Here we are. Let me just share the screen. So this is called PlayPod Scrap Store. Let me take it back to the beginning. Oh, doesn't want to go back to the beginning. Here we are.
Benefit children's free play and support their behaviour in school. The study was an immense success and provided a wealth of evidence that children who are happy and engaged in play have a better experience at school. It has also been found that the adults in the school have a better experience of their school day. We have found that introducing a scrap store play pod in schools during lunchtime has 1. Introduced learning through play, 2. Significantly enhanced inclusion for all children, 3. Increased critical skills development, and 4. Helped to improve children's relationships and self-confidence. The Scrap Store Playpod helps to meet the 5 outcomes of Every Child Matters, and it enables children to experience other learning opportunities such as teamwork, negotiation, risk management, conflict resolution, improved communication, and problem solving, all of which add up to happier, engaged children in school at lunchtimes.
So although this is lunchtime provision, a lot of schools are now using this
impact on the quality of the children's play.
during daytime.
Giving children a whole diverse range of things to do. It's given them an opportunity to develop creative play. More than anything, it's given them the chance to have a lot of fun and to work together as small groups, pairs, big groups. It's encouraged them to do a lot more talking.
The materials in the play pod don't dictate the way that children play with them. Children are free to use their imagination.
And that is the theory of loose parts. Now I'm going to stop the share then, I'm going to stop the video. Now, is that what play looks like? Is that what learning looks like? Is it? Is that what learning looks like? It's interesting because a lot of the educators said that language just completely changed, relationships changed. And actually the children seemed that there was less conflict, because you kind of see some of the equipment there and you just think, oh, you can imagine so and so hitting somebody else across with one of those pipes. But actually there was less conflict. And I don't know what happens within your setting, but I know when I go into lots of schools, there's like a queue for the ice pack to go down to different children during break time where they've fallen over and things. But it didn't happen with the Playpod Scrap Store. So it doesn't, Playpod Scrap Store is that company, but just saying that actually thinking about loose parts, thinking about that inclusivity, so thinking about what equipment you can bring in for your provision, thinking about how we kind of need to kind of recalibrate what we think of play and physical activity. Okay, back to the screen. Relational ethnography. So what does relational ethnography mean? Well, relational ethnography is looking at things that we did perhaps in our childhood. So I'm wondering whether anybody remembers making one of these. Oh, some nodding of heads. Okay, so this is a fortune teller. So the fortune teller predicts our fortunes, as you know. So I'm going to show you the fortune teller and I'm going to pick a colour, red, bra, da, and then I'm going to choose the number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to choose 5. Whatever it says, we have to do. It's just the way it is. Okay, so there's no getting out of it. Sorry about this, everybody, but that's what the fortune teller has said. We need to move like a crab on the floor. Okay, so that's everybody with your videos on. And Elaine, I'm going to trust that you're doing it. So we're going to move like a crab on the floor. Here we go. You're limited for space there, Brianne, aren't you? Okay, well done. So what else have we got? We won't do any more. We'll save that for another time. But some of the other ideas we have are, can you make 10 snow angels on the floor? 10 jumping jacks? Can you balance a book on your head? Can you wriggle like a snake? 10 star jumps? Bounce and box like a kangaroo? So all of these are just some fun, simple ways of introducing some physical activity, sort of bursts it within the day or within your provision. There's a great way to do that. Sorry, I've just seen a chat. Oh, I think it's the same message, sorry. Okay, back to the screen. So Eisner, who's one of my favourite theorists, said that teaching is an art in the sense that it's not dominated by prescriptions and routines, but is influenced and guided by qualities and contingencies that are unanticipated and unfold during the course of action. When things are, we know what's going to happen. So if we know that at 10 o'clock in the morning is phonics time, they become a bit boring for us as adults as well as for the children. So we need these unfolding enlightenments, things that are unanticipated. We need to inject some curiosity. We need to inject some anticipation. We need children to have these times of fun and enlightenment within their days, rather than those prescriptions. Some things, absolutely, yes, we need some structure there, but within that structure, we can have those injections of creativity. When it's safe to do so, implement touch, because tactile experiences are vital for children's development, promoting physical and emotional well-being and nerve growth. And being touched, so children holding hands, increases serotonin levels, thereby reducing levels of cortisol, slowing down the heart rate and enabling deep sleep. And early childhood touch releases oxytocin, responsible for bonding and attachment. So it could be something like a simple activity where they have to relay, but they have to high five. Or it could be something where you're doing something on the lines of country dancing, where they're partnered up with somebody and they gallop up and down together. Or it could be in and out the dusty bluebells, where they hold hands, make a circle and weave in and out. But anywhere where we can, when it's safe to do so, where we can implement touch is so important. And we must also remember about thinking about nerve growth, that there are over 250,000 nerve endings in our feet. So we need to make sure that children have time without shoes and socks on, where they can explore and feel their way around the world and develop their proprioceptive system. A lovely activity that I like to do with young children without their shoes and socks on is to use bubble wrap, getting them to experience walking on the bubble wrap. So we might want to find different ways of moving. What's going to be the most effective way to pop the most bubbles? Is it going to be jumping? Is it going to be crawling? Is it going to be hopping? Is it going to be rolling? Which is the best way to travel along the bubble wrap without popping them? Is it going to be rolling like a pencil? Is it going to be tiptoeing? Getting the children to explore these movements. Again, remember that environment, the affordance play, is dictating the provision that's available. Looking at those theories. So we've already looked at loose parts theory by Nicholson, Gibson's theory, affordance theory by Gibson. And the core ideology of physical activity and movement practice should encompass a combination of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPN as we often say, which is meeting the child where they are and then extending that zone, that you as a scaffolder, as an educator, can help support them and find and nurture that learning within that zone of proximal development. And then Sternberg's adaptive competence, which is the ability to apply meaningful learned knowledge and skills flexibly and creatively in a variety of contexts and situations. So we could also, another way of phrasing that is looking at schema theory. So schema theory is where we try the same task in different ways. So you might want to look at throwing and catching a scarf, which is the first way to understand hand and eye coordination and look at object control. And then we might move to beanbags, and then we might move to big squidgy balls, and then we might move to tennis balls, and then we might move to ping pong balls, and then we might move to bouncy balls or rugby balls. So we're looking at that same concept within different skill, with the same skill set in different schemas. And then we've got Bruner's scaffolding approach, and then meeting each child at their precise point of progress, Dewey, which again is very similar to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Midline development. This is something else that's going to be very important with assisting children in a post-COVID world. So this is helping to connect all the regions of the brain. So we know the right side of the body controls the left side, the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and vice versa, the left side controls the right side of the body. Now, both sides of the body, of the brain, are responsible for different areas. And in early childhood, we may observe signs of brain disintegration, things like tantrums and emotional outbursts, impulsive behaviours. And for the brain to learn to regulate where those areas are all working together rather than one area dominating the others, it has to learn to work all those areas together, and the best way to do this is by crossing the midline. Now, the midline doesn't just mean our vertical line, it also means our horizontal line, and also our sagittal plane, so our front and back. So anything that involves us reaching over and reaching behind is really good to help develop midline development. Anything that's crossing over both, so if we're bringing our hand to the opposite knee or perhaps rolling, is also really beneficial. Regular exposure to midline development in early childhood presents calmer, happier, regulated behaviour. So what's not to like about that? So, here we go. This is our activity, everybody. We are going to, let's see, 5 o'clock time. So I want this to happen every Thursday now in your life at 5 o'clock. You're going to line dance. Okay, let me just close that so I can see you all. There we go, closing the chat box. So, for this activity, I would use a piece of masking tape. So I've got my masking tape on the floor, and my masking tape shows the children where the line is. So my line is on the floor. Now, often when I work with reception teachers, the first term is a nightmare at getting the children to line up. With coaches as well, you'll know that getting children in early years to line up can take about 20 minutes. Now, that's because children don't have abstract thinking. They haven't developed their spatial conception of that. So they need to see that line. So there we can see the line on the floor. As soon as they see a line, it becomes concrete and tangible. They know what it is, so that they can understand that. So we need to think about using tape or using chalk to make that real, so they can see the line. Now we're going to work on a 4/4 rhythm. So we're going to look at using 4 movements to 4 beats. And we're going to cross over the sagittal plane and crossing over the midline and vertical line axis. As well as that, we're going to be having fun, which is great. And as well as that, we're going to be thinking about musicality, rhythm, and we're going to make it gradually a little bit more challenging as we start. So I'm just going to take you through the first process. So if you have room and you have space, please do join in. You'll feel great for it, I can promise you. And your brain will be bigger for all that midline development and well regulated. So we're going to start off with 4 claps. Then we're going to move to 4 knee bends. Then we're going to have 4 heels where we lift our toes up on the floor. Sorry, you can't see my toe there. Let you see my toe. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have 4 leg slaps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we repeat it again. 4 claps, 4 knee bends, 4 heels, and then 4 leg slaps on the other leg. So that's the first section. Then we change the ending. So what's great about this is that it's something that the children can remember, so they're developing mastery skills because they know what's happening. Clapping knee bends, heels. Then because we're changing the ending, we've got that bit of creativity and progressive learning as well, a bit of a challenge for them. So we've moved from that, and then we're going to go into a lasso and swing that lasso around our head. So we're thinking again about that midline development, crossing over the vertical line. Then we change the ending again. So we've got 4 claps, 4 knee bends, 4 heels, and this time we take out our squirty water pistols and we squirt from side to side. Look how I'm crossing the sagittal plane and both vertical and midline. Then the last one we have, so we've got 4 claps, 4 knee bends, 4 heels, and then we have some opposite work where we have the opposite arm reaching to the opposite foot and then behind, which is really challenging. So 4 at the back. Okay, please tell me I'm not doing this on my own. Who's joining me? Phil, you look like you're up for it. Come on. Come on, who else is with me? Let's get this going. Let's get this party started. I was going to say it's Friday, but it's not, is it? It's Thursday. But we can pretend it's Friday. Okay. Here we go. Okay, release your inner Wild West. Here it. 4 claps.
There's a reason for the sunshine sky.
Knee bends.
There's a reason
Big heart, big collab today.
why I'm feeling so high.
4 heels.
It's the season when that love light shines
4 leg slaps.
all around us.
From the beginning.
So let that feeling grab you deep inside.
Knee
So
bends.
you really
If you have an involuntary
where
knee
you
heart, go
get
for it.
wide and then go stealing
Yeah!
through the moonlit night.
Opposite leg. Now this is the best part. On your horses, everybody. Are you ready? I hope there's no one else in the room because you're going to gallop round your room like nobody's watching. Here we go. Lovely, Brianne. Keep going. When was the last time you did this? I hope it was this morning. Okay, back in line. 4 claps.
There's a reason for the warm, sweet night.
Knee bends.
There's a reason for the candlelight.
Heels.
The season when those love lights shine
Lasso.
all around us. So
Clap.
let that wonder take you into space.
Knee
And
bends.
may you wonder, it's loving embrace.
Heels.
Just feel the thunder as it wants your
Lasso with
way.
the other arm.
Can't hold back.
Ready? On your horse. It's a fast one this time. Good. It's a stallion. It's a wild stallion. The legs jumping. Jump. Keep going. Yeah. And line up, line up. Ready for this clap?
Just let your love flow like a mountain stream.
Knee bend.
Let your love flow with the smallest of dreams.
Heels.
And let your love show.
Get those water pistols ready.
It's the season.
Yeah.
Let your love fly like a bird on the wing. And
Knee
let your
bend.
love find you to all living things.
Heels.
And let your love shine.
That's that tricky one. So crossing over, opposite side. And then behind you.
Just let your love flow like a mountain stream.
And a big, yeah! Well done. Marvellous. I bet you feel all the better for it, don't you? Oh, somebody's popped something in the chat room. Oh, you're up. Good, Elaine. Fabulous. Okay. So, in the chat room, how do you feel after that? Let's see some comments in the chat box. Anybody's neighbours complaining? More energetic, like a wild stallion. Southern Brothers and Quiver. I don't know that. Ah. I'm going to write that down and Google Southern Brothers and Quiver. Quiver. Is that the person's name? That's incredible. Or the band. Okay, fabulous. Back to the screen share. So that line dance. There was lots of learning happening within a broader capacity of fun. Now, what's great about that activity is that when the children are on the line, they'll all be looking at you. They forget that they can't see their peers. So if you've got any children who are feeling self-conscious about doing that activity, it's great because they actually forget that the children are there. So they're so busy, focused around what you're doing, that when it becomes that free time, everybody just wants to gallop because children have their fabulous imaginations at being Wild West superheroes, cowboys and cowgirls. Fundamental movement skills. Structured or unstructured? Well, we need a bit of both, don't we? Children need to develop mastery skills and object control and body management and locomotor, but it needs to be within an early years fundamental movement skills way. Fun, mystery, remember I spoke about anticipation and curiosity, and sensory. We need to draw in these three concepts when we're working with early years. Some other fabulous equipment that I use with young children are these. I don't know if anybody's seen these before. These are called finger lights. They're great. They do as they say on the tin. They're lights that go on your fingers. And they're great for children, again, who are feeling self-conscious because you can just turn off all the lights, or in the winter when it starts to get dark earlier, children go outside and they become so absorbed using these lights. You might want to use something like Stravinsky's fireworks composition, which is a beautiful piece of classical music, or Katy Perry's firework, and get the children to create their own firework movements. So giving them that freedom, that autonomy within the movement experiences, and using stimuli that's going to engage them and help develop their creativity is so important. Stimuli, stimuli, stimulus. Equipment, apparatus, stimuli should all be appropriate to the age and stage of development for each cohort. And in early years, creativity is key, offering provision which enables children to explore the potential of objects and become agents of their own play. Now, managing classes effectively using approaches which are appropriate to pupils' needs in order to involve and motivate them. So look at what we've spoken about before already. We've looked at using music, so the music of the Battelley brothers within a Wild West theme. We looked at bubble wrap. We've used tape, which is concrete and tangible. We could use that tape to create grids and shapes for children to move along. We've looked at the finger lights. We've looked at the fortune teller. All of these things are appropriate for young children because they have that element of curiosity about them. So in early years, equipment should be as open-ended and diverse as possible. So try using these objects: bubble wrap, scarves, paper bags. What can we do with paper bags? You can do so much with paper bags. You can make different patterns using paper bags. We can get children to look at positional language: on top, behind, underneath, between, closed, open, lots of different ways to think about positional language. We can use ping pong balls, give a child a ping pong ball and get them to blow them, really helping them to use bear crawling and increasing their lung capacity. Using old carpet tubes to create obstacle courses. Tarpaulins, again, to help create obstacle courses and movement play. Pillowcases, like sack races. If children are struggling, especially the younger cohorts, to jump, two-feeted jump, give them a pillowcase, because what happens then if they're inside a pillowcase and they jump? Both feet will lift off the ground. Tights and socks, really good for resistance, for stretching. It doesn't need to be complicated, expensive equipment. Foil blankets, The foil blankets when you finish a marathon, those you can get, I think you can get 4 for £1 from Poundland at the moment. And you can take them outside and they make this lovely sound, and we could think about thunder, we could think about lightning, we could think about space, we could explore lots of movement with them. We can use bamboo canes along with those other things, thinking about loose parts. We can recycle junk. We could go to a big fridge freezer industrial unit and ask for their really big cardboard boxes and think about the play that we can help to navigate using that. And those cardboard boxes on as well with the recycled junk. So lots of stimuli that perhaps some of you might not think of as PE based, but actually it is. It's physical education and learning to incorporate things that are actually having that transfer of skills and can be used at home. So what can often happen in education is that we're giving children opportunities to explore equipment that isn't available at home, but in early years that needs to be able to be transferred so children can have access to things that are at home as well. So how can we increase physical activity levels and create sustainability? Well, we need to increase outdoor play. We need to ensure activities are inclusive. Music is great for inclusivity. We need to provide exciting stimuli. We need to be more active ourselves because it's going to impact on our work and our provision. We need to draw on communities. We need parents on board. We need the whole school approach. There's often this sort of dichotomy of, you know, children going from reception to year 1 and just thinking, what happened to play? We need to think about continuous provision. You know, a lot of year 5s and 6 will probably only have 45 to 60 minutes of PE a week, if they're lucky twice a week, but generally it tends to be once a week. It's been pushed and pushed out. But no, they need access to that. And remember, music enhances mood, so thinking about music to offer some provision and inclusivity in your practice. Here we are exploring the bubbles of the bubble wrap after we've travelled along it. There were a few left for us to pop with our fingers. Now, recent research demonstrates that the brain's plasticity could be improved by a single 30-minute session of physical activity, with noticeable changes after only 15 minutes of exercising. Now, neuroplasticity is the chief mechanism for the promotion of learning and is responsible for the production and strength of connections between neurons, as well as connectivity between different brain regions. So indubitably, exercise and physical activity increase cognitive motor function. This was a study that I did 2 years ago with a reception class. It was over 6 weeks. I did 2 hours a week, a Tuesday afternoon and a Thursday afternoon for 6 weeks. And then we looked at the levels of, on development matters, looked at where the children were in relation to their early learning goals for the prime and specific areas of development. Now, the activities were all movement-based, with using a movement philosophy, but they were, as we've just spoken about, they were creative and anticipated, lots of free movement, autonomy. There was also directed provision as well as free provision. But you can see there that communication and language, huge jump. PD, again a huge jump. PSED, a jump. Literacy, small. Maths, small. Understanding of the world, a big jump. And expressive arts and design, a small jump. Now, interestingly, the cohort that didn't have the provision saw less than half of the progress in every single area. So I remember looking at the data with the teachers thinking, oh dear, we didn't do very well in literacy and maths. But actually for 6 weeks, that was a huge jump. So we can see how interesting it is to gauge what just incorporating those 2 hours of movement provision from a creative perspective can offer children. Now, one of the assessment tools we used was called the DAP test by Goodenough Harris, the Draw a Person test. And Cahill, he drew a self-portrait of himself at the beginning of the intervention, and then once again at the end of the intervention. Now, you can see that Cahill's sense of self has altered considerably from the 6-week period. We can see that change. So how can we plan a lesson? How can we think about early years provision? Well, primarily, we need to observe the children. Are there any emerging topics or interests? Because we want children to be engaged. So if they're really showing an interest in a dinosaur theme, then let's see if we can think about the way that dinosaurs move and somehow incorporate that into what we're doing. Can we maintain some flow and some consistency, thinking about that schema theory? Can we include time for children to have agency over the activity? Rather than us dictating what's going to happen, can we give time, perhaps we're giving children lots of exposure to different balls so they can explore a rugby ball, a cricket ball, and feeling them. What do they feel like? What do they smell like? How do they feel on the floor? Which one's soft? Which one's hard? What do you think about these balls? Which is your favourite ball? Getting them to have agency over that. Can we plan those unfolding enlightenments? Can we weave them into our practice? Can we have reflection in action and use our tool belt? So the tool belt is what I speak to educators and coaches about having this tool belt of activities and provision that's going to, that you know works. We all go into teaching one day and it won't work as well as we'd planned, or we might have to completely change our lessons. But think about those activities that really work, those lessons that really work, and have them in your tool belt. So when days like that happen, just say, okay, well, I know that works. I know this is going to really get children moving. They love it. Let's do this activity when we bring everything back. Be conscious of the fundamental movement skills and interweave them into the lesson, but don't let them dominate your practice. Don't have long periods of time sitting or waiting. That's a definite no-no. We don't want a class of 30 reception children waiting in a long line for one children to kick a ball into a goal. That should never happen. Keep activities succinct and repeat if they've been enjoyed, and use stimuli and develop the usage over time. And then the final thoughts. And in such an unprecedented year, your contribution to children's physical and emotional well-being has been noted and will be invaluable to their future progression. And that's a big thank you from me as a parent and a fellow educator for all the work that you're doing. So thank you very much. And there is my Twitter handle and my Facebook handle if anybody wants to follow any of my work. Oh, actually, quickly, let me grab my book. Let me just quickly show you my book. This is really useful. Here it is. I'm coming back. This is my book that came out a couple of weeks ago, 1st of April, and it's called 50 Fantastic Ideas for Songs and Rhymes. And what's great about it, AFP have just written about it, they've given a fabulous review, is that each song has a what to do, what you need, top tip, what to do, what's in it for the children, so looking at learning outcomes and then taking it forward, and each taking it forward section is movement based. So it's how to take those action songs and make them physical. Okay, so that's the end of today's session. Sorry, I feel like I've bombarded you all with information. Do you have any questions, anybody? It was the Battelley brothers, I said, yes. This person and Quiver. It was the Battelley brothers. Any questions?
Yeah, is there any particular age you think that you should stop at? I take on your point about how the sort of like free play seems to end in reception and doesn't come across like to key stage 1 and certainly beyond into key stage 2. So I'm guessing you would say that it should go right through. But those, and the same with those sort of activities, would you suggest still trying to incorporate those even up to years 5 and 6?
Definitely. I mean, if you have a look at the PlayPod Scrap Store, if you watch that whole video, it's 11 minutes, have a look on YouTube. They incorporate the whole school, and the years 5 and 6 are having just as much fun as the early years. And what's great is actually they're mixing ages. So you'll see the older ones and the younger ones working together, which is that pastoral community. You know, that's how community starts, isn't it? And that's so important and so valuable, where the younger ones are aspiring to be like the older children. The older children are using their pastoral skills to help.
So, have you seen that yourself in schools? Because we under normal sort of circumstances have play leaders, but they tend to be more sort of traditional activities and games. So encouraging them to get involved and do those sort of things when we get back to some normality would be a good idea. You've seen the benefit of that yourself, yeah?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Cool.
And actually, I think the play pods, I think the training with the play pods, and then to get the play pods, it's about £1,500. But you can, you know, you speak to other members of staff, you can all bring in that provision yourself. You know, you can just buy one of those big plastic sheds, can't you, and put it at the bottom of the fields, and then get everybody to get everything out. So it doesn't need to be that, you know, that amount of money. We can. I know that when I used to live in Birmingham, there was a great recycling place that I just used to come out with these big trolleys full of random things and just think, how can I do that? What can I make with this? It was a great experience. But no, good question, Phil. Absolutely. And I know sometimes we think, we know in our hearts of hearts that is the provision that's going to evoke that curiosity and help language. But there's part of our brain that's going, well, that's not what learning looks like. That's not what learning, you know, what about sitting down and learning your phonics? What about adding? That's not going to happen. But there's plenty of time for that, isn't it? And we must remember that in Scandinavia, where they have the best primary school levels of attainment, they don't start formal education till the age of 7. It's play up until then. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
No problem, Phil. Oh, I can see Elaine said I got the parachute out with year 6 to play the other day and they loved it. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can remember I was a reception teacher in the school. I was doing some supply, and they used for their Key Stage 2 class, their year 5-6 class. It was quite a small school. They would send them, right, you've been, you know, your behaviour is not acceptable, so you're going into reception. And the teacher was thinking that was actually a real punishment, you know, going in the baby room. But they loved it. And they'd come and sit with me and we'd be doing some junk modelling and crafting. And I was thinking, I don't think the teacher realises that actually they're loving coming into reception. It's certainly not a punishment at all. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you to all of you for joining in and for galloping around your rooms. It was wonderful to see you participating, so thank you for that. And I hope you found it beneficial. I hope you've got some nuggets that you can take away and think about your provision. And it was interesting just reviewing the current literature and research that's out there, looking at children's physical activity levels and reflections of that during lockdown. Lots to think about. Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Elaine. That's wonderful.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was brilliant.
Good, thank you.
And I've proven that you can trot in a very small space.
Good. Without knocking over your banner.
I know, I was very, very careful. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. This has been recorded, so it will be available to watch back if you want to see yourself trotting around a room again at some point soon.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.